are going through very hard times, and we as Sister Cities have been together with the Salvadoran communities facing many different contexts and struggles and also victories. So this time in this member meeting, we want to reflect on the path that we have been walking together for those years. And for that, we are going to watch a video from a event that we had 4 years ago. So from that video, we are going to hear about the history of Sister Cities, the key of this organization, or the main purpose of this organization when it was founded, when we as Sister Cities started, like almost 40 years back in time. And then we are going to hear also what were some of the issues that both communities in El Salvador and also in the States were facing 4 years ago. Then we are going to go to breakout rooms and discuss with our team there two questions. One will be, what has happened in the US politically and socially in the last 5 years or 4 years, and how we as a network have responded to that context? And the second question, we will be pasting these questions in the chat. The second question you will be discussing after watching the video is, what has happened in El Salvador in the last 5 years, and how we as a network have accompanied our communities and Cryptes as the popular movement in El Salvador. So we are going to watch the video. We will be paying attention to the details that people that attended to this event were discussing, and then we are going to bring those details to our discussion and add others if that is the case. Remember, we will be discussing the context, political, social, and economic context that we are facing right now, that we have faced in the last 5 years or 40 years, and how we have responded. So right now we're going to start watching the video. Um, one moment, please. Okay. And share the sound. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Let me know if you have problems listening to the audio. Can you hear the audio?
Historically, we've always sort of been driven
Can it
by
be
our
bigger?
Salvadoran partners in terms of what role we play and what issues to address. I would say our role is to look at U.S. policy when possible in regards to El Salvador or Salvadoran immigration, and to try to change that policy or make that policy more in line with our own values.
One thing that I saw shared during some of the protests over the summer of the Black Lives Matter movement was encouraging white protesters to essentially form a shield or a wall, both due to being less likely to be dehumanized, due to not being the people that the protest was necessarily for. So therefore, the white protesters would basically form the outside and the first people to make eye contact before someone was going to pepper spray or shoot a rubber bullet, and hopefully incur benefits from that. And I can definitely see parallels when actions needed in El Salvador to that sort of action.
I think there's a real need for a lot of advocacy and speaking out on immigration issues in this country. And I'd love to see us, in terms of leverage our privilege and and finding ways to acknowledge it and try to diminish it too, to take the route that we took with the sistering movement and, sort of raise Salvadorians who are here in this country to leadership in creating ways for that advocacy. Dennis's point about that we have inside stories of what drives migration from our brothers and sisters in their communities is really important, and we can help to tell those stories. But I also think we need to know how we can be best useful in that struggle.
We're going to have to meet the challenges ahead with, much creativity, a lot of new hands helping, particularly younger people from communities here in the US, college students, those who care about Latin America, those who care about, El Salvador in particular. Salvadorans who are fighting, to remain in the US. Those that are just arriving and will eventually live in our communities.
I think the question about privilege is, as white USers, is really important to look at. Obviously, white people are treated differently in El Salvador, and the fact that we have Salvadoran members of our committees is really important. And I think that is something that we could work more on. And when we have delegations, if possible, include Salvadorans.
So where we have aging committees, I mean, the old structure of the 13 or 14 committees are still around. We're all getting pretty old, so in the last 2 years, we've had a big influx of national members like Bill, who came out of the popular education things, which has been the one thing that we've done in the last 5-6 years that has really helped bolster the U.S. side. It's really great, we had 2 board members right away from that same group you were in, Bill, after that meeting in Chicago. It was amazing.
And it will be nice if we can invite people who are not in the network to listen and be part and see if they would like to participate. And maybe, I don't know how possible will be that to have this kind of meeting, not only with the staff in El Salvador, but it will be nice if we can have some members of the community sharing with us what are their conditions, what is the situation, what are the problems that they have, to motivate people to get involved in the United States. And listen to those who are affected directly, I think will also be a way to impact the communities in here.
There is a couple in our group that's the husband is from El Salvador and actually has family in Arcatao, and then he married a woman from Wisconsin, and now they live in Madison. And they were in Arcatao. He was visiting family, and in the Historical Memory Museum, they saw a picture of Madison Arcatao Sister City Project and read about the solidarity between Madison and Arcatao, and they went, "What?" They did, because they found out about it in Arcatao, not in.
Oh wow, that's so nice.
But yeah. I just want to say that they are very active members, and they have a really heartfelt connection to Arcatao and to the Sister Cities, and it's really revitalized our group. And I just keep thinking that that's going to be a really important piece going forward, is to be connecting with Salvadorans that live here.
Okay, so as you could see in the video, as I said, that was from an event 4 or 5 years ago with historic members of the network. We were talking about the reason of Sister Cities back in the 80s, mid-80s, and then how we have been walking and accompanying communities in El Salvador and the popular movement. And today the intention of watching the video is to keep thinking and reflecting on what's our role as a network, what we have been doing, during the last few years, and then to set our goals and see how we are going to keep this movement walking and, you know, in a way growing as well, we can say. So for that, we invite, or Emma will help us doing groups to talk about these two questions: what has happened in the US politically and socially in the last 5 years, and how we have responded, and also what has happened and what, and if we see that there have been some improvements in the context that we're seeing in the States and also in El Salvador, and how we are, or if we are prepared to respond to the context that we are facing in both countries. So we are going to go to the breakout rooms, and we will have around 15 minutes to discuss. You can share from your own experience, from the experiences of your communities, what you have heard from your sister communities, what you have heard on the news as well, and what you think that we as a network can respond to that reality. Is there any question so far? No? Perfect. Okay, so we will have one facility. Well, there will be one staff person to help engage in the conversation, but you are free to take the lead during or within your group. Emma?
All right, thank you. So we are going to be moving into the breakout rooms, like Zulma mentioned, and there will be 3 breakout rooms that open up, and I'm gonna have one group stay in the main room here. So
So sorry, Emma. Before we go, I just wanted to double check that we still don't have anybody that needs interpretation. Solo quería confirmar que todavía no tenemos a nadie que necesita interpretación. Si alguien necesita, nada más hay que escribir a alguien de staff o a mí y podemos empezar con la interpretación. Gracias.
beautiful. All right, so we will see you in, let's see. So just to confirm, Zulma, we're gonna spend 10 minutes in breakout rooms.
Yeah, 10 minutes to, yeah, I think, Marin, are you taking the time, keeping track of time? 10 minutes? Okay, 10 minutes. Thank you.
All right, see you all in 10 minutes. All right, so we have a few folks here who have not joined. Most folks who are in this group are just going to be staying in here with my group. So we can go ahead and dive into those questions. So the first one is, what has happened in the US politically and socially in the last 5 years, and how have we responded as a network? And if we're newer to the network, we can also focus on the situation politically in the US. Who would like to?
Hey, Emma, I want to introduce my friend Suzette, who is going with me on our delegation in 10 days.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for coming to this event. Thanks. It's great to meet you. So does somebody want to either share out loud or share something in the chat? I'm just going to pause the recording really quick.
Share briefly what they discussed and some of the main takeaways that they had from the discussion. So go ahead. And if nobody wants to volunteer to be first, I can nominate Olivia from our group. Oh, I will nominate myself. Thank you, Marin. We had representatives from Bangor and Cambridge, and we spoke a lot about immigrant rights. and violations of immigrant communities in the United States, and the increasing levels of incarceration and collaboration in incarceration between US and El Salvador, as Trump and Bukele have been working on. Additionally, we spoke about the devastation that our sistering communities have faced in the last 5 years, specifically with the amount of youth leaving our communities. Great, thank you. How about someone from Zuma's group?
Someone from our group? Who wants to provide a brief summary of what we were discussing?
So we, like the group that just discussed, we were talking a lot about immigration and the changes that have happened, the increased militarization, and how kind of both of our countries are moving in the same direction very closely, in terms of moving towards fascism and a police state. We talked about the recent meeting with Rubio and Bukele. We talked about just kind of clarifying what is going on, what's the status of TPS, particularly for the Salvadoran community. Talked about particularly Bill's comment about how do we stand, for those of us who identify as white in the group, how do we think about how we're putting our bodies on the lines like we did in our origin story during the Civil War. And then kind of at the end, we're just starting to talk about, is there a mass movement starting in the US? Why or why not? And then we came back. Please, if I missed anything, jump in. Willie or Mary.
You're muted, Mary.
Mary, you're still muted.
We got from the discussion, I feel that El Salvador has more mass movement, and I think the U.S. Needs to learn more from that. But I think it's growing in the U.S. But I guess from seeing in El Salvador, I got this feeling that there's a strong, real strong movement there. I feel that sometimes.
I think you summarized it pretty well. I was just starting to say mass movement when we got shifted out of here, but I think that so much has happened in the last 2 weeks that I think people are kind of like being lulled out of being asleep for the last 2 centuries, and they just haven't quite reacted yet. They're just going like, "What the?" Not as far as it's gotten around people around me. And some people are just they're just demented. No one knows what they're doing.
All right. Anybody else want to share what they talked about in their group?
I nominate Jennifer or Bill.
The things we talked about that's similar between the US and El Salvador is the use of criminalization to dehumanize people. And this idea that immigrants in the United States are by definition criminals. And in El Salvador, the state of exception, which allows the state to declare anyone a criminal. Such a horrifying vision to think of the United States sending people to the Salvadoran prison, which is not being monitored at all, and in which we know there are major human rights abuses going on, and probably people dying every day. And I was just saying that what I really appreciate about the Sister Cities is that in spite of how difficult this all is, we continue to show up for each other and for our communities and try to help figure out the way forward.
Bill wrote in the comments that the mention of mass movement makes me recall last spring and how college administrators tried to make it seem like working with people who know how to organize was a criminal act. Emma says that there was a huge protest in Denver today at the Capitol against ICE and deportations and for immigrant rights. People are mobilizing.
There was a protest in Austin today as well.
That's good. All right. Anybody else did anybody speak from Kelly's group?
Stacy, DJ.
Yeah, hi, sorry, I had a work thing. Yeah, so we talked about first with like how American politics are becoming more nationalistic, and also as that organizations like our Sister Cities group to overcome that, and how El Salvador is their style of governance with like the authoritarianism and like kind of embracing these kind of like flashy, expensive projects over like basic human needs stuff like healthcare and education seems to be an inspiration for certain parts of like the American political system as well. So this is kind of playing back and forth with each other, and guess why we're seeing why like these right-wing politicians like Bukele or Trump find so much common ground. And also how Salvadorans are opposing Bukele and how we can learn from them.
Great, thank you, TJ. Does anybody else have any last things they want to share before we move on to the next part of the event? Okay, in that case, I'm going to share with you guys my screen. In addition to reflecting on all of the things that have happened in the past 5 years, which I think ends up being a really heavy conversation, we also wanted to kind of come back towards reflecting on how we're going to respond to what's going on this year, and what is in our strategic plan, what are our goals, how are we moving forward, because it's important, as always, not to stay too much in the pessimistic mindset, and also to have radical optimism going forward. So this year we had an excellent group of people create a strategic plan. So in that plan, we have certain 5 SMARTY goals. So 5 goals that we're kind of working towards over the course of the year. The first goal that we have is to strengthen communication with CRIPTES. This is especially important as the US and El Salvador are both going through moments of immense political upheaval, to make sure that we're continuing our communication. So to do that, we're going to identify a list of high priority issues and topics that impact the work of CRIPTES and Sister Cities to be discussed in 10 semi-monthly solidarity meetings with the CRIPTES Junta Directiva and the coordinating team throughout 2025. We'll also continue to evaluate the quality of communication with CRIPTES. Our second goal is to increase diversity of membership, something that has come up in meetings today, as well as meetings in the video that we watched from 4 years ago, about how many of our committees are aging, and it continues to be important to increase diversity in the group of people that are part of Sister Cities. And so to do that, we are going to seek out and support youth leadership, share current leadership roles across age groups, also seek out and support Salvadoran leadership in the US, collaborate with Salvadorans in leadership roles in our organization, And finally, seek out, engage with, and learn from people and leaders of color of other resistance movements in order to develop more relevant organizing strategies. I think it's great that we've already been mentioning today so many of the protests that we see across the US for so many different movements. And I think that that's something we can continue to work on a lot in this coming year. The third goal is to conduct educational activities that inspire engagement and funding. And so we have a couple specific things that we're going to do that are super exciting this year. First of all, we're going to host a week-long popular education school in El Salvador. That'll be in August. We don't have the specific date set yet, but stay tuned for more details. We're also hoping to work on expanding our work, conducting one-day popular education workshops or other activities with, for example, universities, and continue to do lots of smaller workshops and activities over the course of the year. We're also going to focus on engaging new people during the annual tour. And finally, continue to hold bi-monthly member meetings on critical topics to educate and engage current and new members. The fourth goal is to increase historical memory through political education within sister cities. And so that will mean deepening knowledge of the history of struggle in El Salvador, and also to celebrate the anniversary of events of different events occurring in different sister cities. Many of our communities have specific dates that hold a lot of relevance and are very representative of specific acts of resistance and acts of organizing that have occurred. And so this year we hope to celebrate those days and make sure that we're remembering all of the different things in our own historical memory and in the historical memory of all of the communities that are part of our network, and remembering those moments and celebrating them. And finally, we are going to strengthen solidarity through communication, accompaniment, and delegations. To do this, we are going to define commonly used terms like solidarity, accompaniment, and communication. Continue to make sure that we all understand what all of those things mean, and that as a movement, we are moving towards the same goals. We're also going to strengthen solidarity through accompaniment by being responsive to sister communities' needs and special requests for support. An example of how we're already starting to work on this is that our communities in the Bajo Lempa region regularly experience severe flooding, which is really harmed by the government's total lack of response. And so we're hoping to do a fundraiser this year to support specifically Las Anonas in responding to those kind of regular natural disasters that occur. And we're also going to strengthen communication between circles and sister communities and share information in local communities in the US. Strengthen solidarity by having delegations to sister communities. And we're also going to begin planning a human rights delegation in the early part of 2026, which will serve to strengthen solidarity. I think that all of us are aware as we watch the news that human rights becomes each day a more and more dire issue. And so we want to make sure that as a network, we're paying attention to that kind of concern. There, and that's all of our goals for this year. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them or put them in the chat. We'll continue to work on these goals throughout the year. They will be things that we continue to kind of move back towards as we move through our different projects. And then if nobody has any questions, I am going to pass the microphone to Kelly, who is going to speak about the people who are no longer with us.
Okay, so now we are going to do a little activity because we know that sister cities have been working for more than 30 years, almost 40 years. And we know that a lot of people have been working with us during those years, and some of them are no longer with us. Some of them are retired, and some of them just So that's why we want to remember and honor those who are no longer with us, because they had a really important part in our network. Um, that's why I'm going to share my screen, and I want you to write in the chat the names of the people that you want to honor in this moment.
Let's be bigger.
Please write in the chat the names. I had some technical problems. I'm sorry about that. Um, but thanks to all of you to share those names. Now we will have some time to, if some of you want to share uh, a story or an anecdote about these people, this is the time that you can share. It could be a funny story, or it could be just time to say thanks for all the work that these people did in our network.
I can share a memory of Jim and Julia Wallace. So I had the privilege of knowing them, and particularly in the last chapter of Julia's life, when she was sick with Alzheimer's, witnessing Jim's um, uh, um, taking care of her. And part of the way I was just so inspired was he continued to always include her, including in our cities meetings. And I have one memory of one meeting in their basement, when we were going around in a circle and sharing kind of what Sister Cities meant to us. And we included Julia, and sometimes Julia would be able to participate, and sometimes it was a little more difficult for her. But in this moment, and I wish I remembered her exact words, but I think it was maybe 4 words, that beautifully described the relationship, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. And so just want to bring that into the space, and it just really showed how impactful this relationship was, that it still was so felt by her, and was still in her brain, in her heart, in her spirit, even in that near end kind of for her. So that's a memory I will always cherish. And then I'll just add, I think I earlier put it, the other most precious memory I have is the only delegation I got to go on with my father, and he was able to do a slideshow for the entire community in Las Flores, and to kind of I can hear them right now kind of reacting to the photos, and that's another special memory that I have of my father.
I'm going through my papers and I came across something written by Jim Wallace, and it was 3 or 4 pages on the way to make telephone calls if you're asking for money or someone to come to, an event. It was the most thorough treatment of making phone calls that I have ever seen. He was a master.
Anyone else?
I have another one of the Davila family. So first of all, I have thoroughly enjoyed knowing Mario and Sarah and their family. And I actually knew that family first through their daughter, who I went to school with. And I had no idea that they had they had this kind of connection between El Salvador and the US. And I was on a delegation, and I was in the home of the Davila family, and I saw another girl that I went to school with that I had no idea was related to Sarah. So it was amazing to kind of be in this home in El Salvador and see this girl that I went to high school with, that I had no idea was connected, white girl. So it was quite a surprise, and wonderful surprise, and just a reminder of how small the world is and how connected we are and how we all are family. So that's another one that sticks out to me, and love Mario and feel very blessed that I got to know him.
Oh, thanks for sharing those lovely stories. And if you have another name that you want to write down, please share that with us, because we are going to be posting the card that we did to celebrate this people.
Is there time for any more stories or not?
Of course, there is time.
I just wanted to share a story, and lots of stories about all these folks, but I want to share a story about Mario. In 1991, which would have turned out to be the last delegation actually before the signing of the peace accords. But we didn't know that that would be true. There was a delegation of us, and we were, I think, 11 women and Mario. And this was a delegation in which, when we got to El Salvador, everyone had to pretend they were tourists because otherwise you couldn't get into El Salvador. And so all the women wore dresses, which was not our common practice, let's just say, for some of us. And so we all got into the country, but our luggage never arrived. And so when we got to El Salvador, we waited for 2 days to try and make it better. But in fact, they never arrived at all. So we arrived in San Jose de las Flores just with some of us had backpacks that we carried on. And so every day we exchanged clothing. Julia Wallace was part of that group. We would just exchange our dresses with one another. And Mario continued to simply wear his pants. The thing that was extraordinary about him was whenever you had a question for Mario about what was happening or about El Salvador, he would never answer. He would ask you to ask the question of people in the community. He knew all the answers, could have answered them himself. But his extraordinary presence was of being a bridge to the community itself and making sure that the people in the community would be the ones to highlight the answers. And so that's how we carried on for that entire 8 days of hilarity with Mario and his women in San Jose de las Flores.
I have one more, Michael Ring Sr. So I got to go on a delegation with all 3 Michael Rings, which was amazing, 3 generations. And that was also really amazing. So I wanted to bring that family as well into the space.
Okay, thank you to all of you for sharing that. We really appreciate that. And it is nice to hear about those stories. Okay, so we are going to move on to our next activity, and I will let you with Emma.
Amazing. Thank you, Kelly, and everyone for sharing. Yeah, like Kelly said, it's just very heartwarming to be able to remember all of those who have came before us in the struggle, who we have fought with side by side in many cases, and grounded in their memory and their dedication to the struggle, and thinking about all of those people who are coming after us and our descendants. We continue the struggle in all of their memory as well. So this is the point of the meeting where I share a little bit of how you can get more involved with Sister Cities if you're interested. So we do have national teams that meet virtually, including the Popular Education Team, US Policy, and Fundraising and Finance. I will drop 2 emails in the chat. So if you are interested in learning more about those teams or would like to get involved with helping to plan events like this or host an event like this yourself, please do reach out. We also have several delegations to El Salvador planned in 2025. Jennifer and Suzette are actually going to be going to El Salvador with the Austin group later this month. So We're very excited for them to be in El Salvador very soon with Kelly and Zulma. And we also are planning, like Maren mentioned, a week-long popular education summer school in El Salvador. So please do let us know if you would like to join an existing delegation, participate in the Pop Ed School, or would like to discuss planning another delegation. We also may have an in-person national gathering this fall, and national gatherings are a great time for everybody in our network to come together to reflect on the year and be able to plan for the future. So keep your eyes out for that. We are going to be doing a US tour in the fall as well. And we are planning a human rights delegation in 2026. If you're not able to participate in the delegation or in an in-person national gathering, we do encourage you to consider making a contribution or asking us to how you can support somebody who would want to participate in those types of in-person events, but do not have the financial ability to do so. That can be a really, really incredible way to give back. And I know a few of you in the audience tonight have done that before. So that's definitely an option. Speaking of money to give back, at Sister Cities, we do operate on a tight budget, and we really, really rely on grassroots support from individual donors. And I also want to take a moment to shout out everybody in this room who I think the vast majority of this group donated to support our end of year fundraiser, and we exceeded our $10,000 goal with the help of everybody. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Those funds go directly to Cryptis organizer salaries and to Sister Cities organizational costs to operate. To keep the momentum going in 2025, we need your continued support, including tonight. So please consider making a donation. There's a donation link in the chat. We also have a PO box where you can mail a check. Donations help us provide vital services like interpretation to make events accessible, and also allow us to respond to growing challenges both in the US and El Salvador, many of which we talked about tonight. To ensure the financial sustainability and stability in 2025 of Sister Cities, we are counting on you. And I don't have to tell you that leftist organizations and activists are facing immense challenges. Many of us are feeling defeated and overwhelmed or in despair, but it's really through events like this, through the grassroots organizing that we've championed for decades, and the unwavering solidarity between us and our Salvadoran partners, our compañeros y compañeras, it's where we draw our strength. For so many years, we have stood side by side with Salvadoran communities, accompanying them through their struggles, just as they have stood with us in our fights. This mutual support, shared struggle, it reminds us that we are resilient, we are powerful, and together we must keep fighting for a better future. So with that, we invite you to donate today, $20 or even $5, which is the cost of a typical coffee nowadays, to help keep the struggle alive and continue to inspire hope and action. And one last note on that is anybody who has not yet received a Sister Cities calendar and donates at least $20 will be mailed a 2025 bilingual calendar. We have 4 left, so you better act quick. They are incredible calendars that feature important dates and photos and just really showcase the powerful transnational solidarity that's at the core of Sister Cities. And lastly, you can check out our blog to stay up to date on news and what Sister Cities is up to. We also have a Facebook account. and an Instagram. You can find all of these links on our website and in the chat as well. And we also invite you to join our Urgent Action Network, where you will also be notified of things happening on the ground and are able to respond to urgent solidarity requests. And with that, we get to end this event a little early. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We really encourage you to keep your eye out for our next members meeting, next events. And also want to say a special thanks to Olivia for standing by as our incredible interpreter for the night. So really appreciate you being here and being willing to step in if you were needed. And with that, I think we all...
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you who work for Sister Cities, who make it possible for all the rest of us to stay connected. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Good to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Really.